Sure wonder if I were here.
If we survive this, I'm gonna kill both of you.
I'm gonna spit on you, Simmons!
Everyone, look unto me!
Oh my God, what are we yelling about?
What's the 411, Daddy-O's?
That was the worst throw ever. Of all time.
Not my fault. Someone put a wall in my way.
Hey, for those of you who don't know me, I'm a nerd who loves the show Red vs. Blue. I grew up with the show. Actually, I already made a tribute video to the series when I found out Rooster Teeth was closing. If you haven't seen it yet, it's just a sort of love letter to one of my favorite shows. Needless to say, Red vs. Blue definitely earned its place on my shelf as one of the greats. But honestly, I never would have guessed that after 21 years, I would find myself back in Blood Gulch in Red vs. Blue Restoration. But why is that? I mean, why are we here? Again. Because reviving a show like that and capturing that same spark that initially made it what it once was is a near impossible task. And that's why so many attempts end up just joining the bottomless dumpster fire that is the soulless sequel and the forgotten cash grab. But I think it's important I say this now. I was wrong about Red vs. Blue Restoration, and here's why. Well, first of all, after I initially watched the series back when I was nothing more than a wide-eyed little youngster, honestly, I probably started watching the show back when I was like 11, which in hindsight might be a little young for all Red vs. Blue has to offer.
Kill the Reds! Kill the Reds! Kill the Reds!
This doesn't seem physically possible!
Oh, son of a...
But regardless, after that, I grew up. For many people, including myself, Red vs. Blue was a staple of my childhood. It was something I remembered fondly, with every current meme or modern reference to the show providing a little dose of that happy nostalgia for a time in my life that is now long gone. A time before rent checks and calorie counting and, well, growing up. So the place in my heart that held up the classic Red vs. Blue we all know and loved, it left a near impossible standard to live up to. And just like the other modern attempts at feeding that nostalgia, like Spider-Man No Way Home and several others, it didn't live up to that standard, whether it was fair for me to judge it that way or not. So after my first watch through of Red vs. Blue Restoration, I felt disappointed. I felt like nothing matched up to the flow or character development or just the fun of the originals. So I went to Reddit to see if anyone felt the same way as me, and what I found was a majority of fans who absolutely loved it. I felt like maybe I missed something, or maybe there was some major piece or reference that went straight over my head. So I sat with my initial thoughts for a few days, and I actually filmed a review based on those first feelings. But upon rewatching some clips of Restoration just to use for that review video, I found myself actually enjoying it. The jokes, the heart, and I decided to give it another chance before making up my mind, and I'm glad I did. Because with the clarity of a second watch, I didn't require this film to restore my childhood innocence. I didn't require it to make all my adult problems disappear, get my parents back together, or finally solve world peace.
To world peace.
World peace.
And without all that, and without waiting to find out whether or not this season was a simulation, more on that later, I discovered something. You see, unlike El Camino, the Breaking Bad movie, the 4th and 5th season of Arrested Development, and even that revival of Gilmore Girls from Netflix, A Year in the Life.
Don't ask questions, don't ask questions.
Okay, listen, I'm aware that the center of the diagram between Red vs. Blue fans and Gilmore Girl fans consists of me, my wife, and some dude you never want to get caught in a conversation with at the public library. But Gilmore Girls has a revival, season/movie sort of thing, so it's relevant here, okay? Anyway, because of the way Red vs. Blue is, it didn't have just one singular tone to recapture like some of these other shows. This meant that it didn't have to perfectly replicate anything of what came before in order to win over our affections and get our buy-in for one last adventure.
One last adventure, Griff.
See, the great thing about Red vs. Blue is it changed its tone and method of storytelling over and over again. It was constantly reinventing itself throughout its 21-year run. From the grounded, standing around and talking of the Blood Gulch era, to the high-concept drama of the Recollection, and then later to the military espionage of the Freelancer saga, and of course, a mix of all of those with the Chorus trilogy, Red vs. Blue could never be pinned down to one singular brand of storytelling. I mean, you could watch seasons 6, 7, and 8 as its own show without watching anything else, and tonally, it would work. You learn pretty much all you need to know for that story within those few seasons. And the same could be said for many of the different eras of Red vs. Blue. So when this season switches things up, whether intentionally or due to its many limitations with Rooster Teeth shutting down, it still works in the larger world of Red vs. Blue because of its history of eclectic storytelling. Look, do I wish certain things were different about Restoration? Yeah. Is this my favorite season or even close? No. But am I glad we got to say goodbye to this show with Bernie back at the helm on his own terms? Heck yes. So let's break this thing down. First, I want to explain the elements of Restoration that I feel it was able to get away with, as well as where it absolutely excelled, because at times it did. And lastly, I want to talk about where I feel it could have been better. Not to bash what we've got, because like I said, I'm ecstatic that we got anything after all this time, and especially with Rooster Teeth shutting down. I really want to give this story its due. The good, the bad, and the unfreaking believable.
This is unbelievable.
Let me ask you a question. Was Red vs. Blue Restoration a simulation, or was it not? I don't know either.
Did you tell all the simulations they were real? No?
Now, there's good and bad to this, right? On one hand, it plays into what Bernie has always tried to do with the series, and it gives the audience a choice. They can pick whatever ending they see fit. So if you like the Blood Gulch Chronicles and wish they ended at season 5, then it did for you. That's your ending. Thematically, it works. That can be the way you view this story. And the same goes for season 8 or 10 or 13 and so on and so forth. So in that sense, you can actually watch Restoration and have all the fun you want with it, as it kind of is real, but canonically can still exist in Epsilon's head, if that's the ending you want. The problem I initially had with this is that every little thing that didn't match up to my perfect pedestal I had for it, and every little thing that seemed off my first viewing, it just kept leading me to believe that there would be this big twist where at the height of all the action, we would cut back to that room from the prologue and at the end of season 13, and we'd find out that none of this was real. I even thought it would be pretty funny if at the end of Restoration, everyone died and we lost all hope and we got wrapped up in that drama before it cut back and we found out that Epsilon was wrong about his simulation, and then in real life, Tucker would just take off the helmet or something stupid and simple like that, and then none of this would actually happen. But that's not what happened. So eventually my anticipation turned to confusion and ultimately disappointment that such bizarre circumstances would actually play out. Like Sarge dying rather unceremoniously, and Doc dying off screen, and the actual Tucker being basically absent from the whole season. But upon rewatching it without that anticipation, I was able to appreciate the story for what it was and what we did get. A completely bonkers and hilarious sci-fi mess that more closely resembled two kids making up a story in the sandbox with their favorite characters than any traditional plot structure. And you know what that's a lot like? Classic Red vs. Blue. Like season 1 crap, when Church died in this military sci-fi show only to become a ghost, or when Caboose fell in love with a tank, or when being blown up by a bomb in Church's stomach sent the group through time hundreds of years into the future, or the fact that the main character was a ghost possessing a robot body for most of the show.
That's right. I'm a gay robot.
One of the major downsides to this season is its major lack of major players from the Red vs. Blue story. Since Red vs. Blue was always bringing back characters from the dead just to have everybody together again, it was a little jarring in this one to have so few main characters. I know this was probably due to Restoration having almost no budget, but I can't help but miss characters like Donut when I'm watching Restoration.
I just refuse to call him Private Donut.
And even the characters that we do get don't necessarily have their fair share of screen time. Like, I see what they were trying to do with Washington's B-plot about the psych hospital and trying to draw more on his roots, since it was one of the first things we knew about him, that he went crazy when Epsilon was in his head, but there just really wasn't enough time to flesh that out. So as a result, the reveal that Doc was dead this whole time felt mostly unearned. Though it did remind me of that one episode from Scrubs when Dr. Cox kept talking to Brendan Fraser after he died.
Where do you think we are?
And actually, while I'm on the topic of Scrubs, I think it's important to note that Restoration didn't make the same mistakes as the Scrubs revival season by quickly replacing our beloved cast with new characters that haven't earned our affection and really that we just don't care about. You see, in the Scrubs revival season, Zach Braff, the main character of Scrubs, was only in the first couple of episodes before disappearing entirely.
Son of a after everything Scrubs did for him?
We could have easily had a season that banked on the new characters from Red vs. Blue Zero, or even newer characters that were written for this season, giving our old cast members and our favorite characters a backseat. But on the contrary, this season actually seems to be a sort of course correction from that very mistake in Red vs. Blue Zero. At least that seems to be what Bernie was hinting at in his podcast.
Well, that's why I went back, right? You and I talked a long time about it because of the state of the show where it was, and it was just clearly not, it was just gonna kind of fade out from where it was. So I went back and worked on it and wanted to give it a nice little bow, like I said, love letter to the fans, and get some closure to some of the characters that we had seen for it. literally decades at this point in time.
This may be the most important thing to mention about Restoration. The jokes were fantastic. In my opinion, they were absolutely up to par with all of Red vs. Blue, all of the previous seasons. But I actually thought it fit in specifically with some of those first few seasons. It just kind of had that energy. Look, I don't care how great your action scenes are or how dramatic your plot is. If your standing around and talking scenes aren't golden, then it's not really going to be Red vs. Blue. Luckily, Restoration signed, sealed, and delivered with the dialogue in this one.
Man, I'm killing these one-liners right now.
A few last things I want to mention. First, Trocadero was sorely missing from the musical score of this film. I mean, Red vs. Blue without Trocadero is like cereal without milk. I'll still eat it, and I'll probably still enjoy it, but in the back of my head, I'm kind of gonna know how much better it could have been. And there are several places in the beginning specifically where it feels like the music was just an afterthought. I mean, when Caboose is trying to explain that he has a message from Epsilon and Griff is telling him that they're not interested, the intensity of the music doesn't match the tone of the scene at all. And that's part of the reason I kept expecting us to find out that this was a simulation that was much more dramatic than whatever really happened, because it just felt off. I mean, we all know that music tells the story just as much as anything else. You don't have to have a degree in film to know that your music choice can make or break a scene. And in this scene, it misses the mark. That being said, I do love that the Bare Naked Ladies made an appearance during the campfire scene. When the Reds and Caboose are remembering all of the best parts of the show, it's a fun little Easter egg we get to experience. For those of you who don't know, Ed Robertson, the lead singer of the Bare Naked Ladies, is a huge fan of the show, and he actually voiced the character Captain Flowers, who appears several times throughout the series.
Tucker, I told you to call me Captain or Cappy. I don't want silly things like rank interfering with our team dynamic.
You got it, Cappy.
It's just fun to know that they were involved in this in some capacity. Okay, here it is. Red vs. Blue Restoration had too many endings and not enough time. And honestly, that shouldn't work. But gosh dang it, it just does. This is what I was trying to say in the beginning. If I wanted to put my film critic glasses on for a moment, I could probably tear this film apart for all of its flaws. But the thing is that Red vs. Blue never appealed to the film critic inside us. It's just not that kind of show. There's something special about Red vs. Blue that makes Restoration a swan song instead of another sad forgotten revival. And that's its absolutely ridiculous capacity to compel its fans, despite jumping the proverbial plot gun and breaking just about every rule in the storyteller's handbook. Red vs. Blue, for all of its flaws, and it's got a lot of them, just has heart. It's the last remnant of the heart that remains from those content creators in the early days of the internet. Back before it was about competing with Netflix, getting a freaking golden play button, or even making money. It stayed true to its archetypes, its jokes, and most importantly, it stayed true to its fans. The fans who laugh when a character dies at the hands of his own teammate and cry when Caboose has to say goodbye to a computer program. It's those same fans who will always light up when they see their favorite idiots back in the sandbox, playing out all of their coolest moments again in a new way, one last time. So now this is the part of the video where I just talk about those moments in Restoration one after another. The goofy, awesome, and yes, sometimes unearned, but somehow still fantastic moments. First, I love that Tucker became the meta. I think that plot-wise, that makes the most sense and is the coolest follow-up to the ending of season 13 I could have ever thought of. I was so pumped when I saw the trailer and saw that this was gonna happen. The one critique I have is that I wish Tucker would have been more brainwashed to be evil by Sigma, rather than just being an unwilling and mostly silent slave. Because then we still could have had Tucker and his personality and his voice be a part of the season, just in a different way. Second, I thought that Epsilon running literally millions of simulations and still being able to predict how stupid Caboose's responses would be was hilarious. And I also love that Caboose could bring back an AI just by remembering them hard enough next to the memory unit. I just feel like all of the stuff with memory in Restoration really tied together the whole memory as a key motif and just kind of wrapped it up very nicely. And I also feel like that plotline, even though I've seen it critiqued as not making any sense, like he's just remembering something next to the unit and it kind of conflicts with different parts, it works for me because, again, I just feel like that is such a kid making up rules in a sandbox kind of plot point, and I'm here for it. It's classic RVB stuff, if you ask me. And if it was Joel still voicing Caboose, I can easily see that being my favorite scene in the season. To be fair, I thought the new voice actor did a great job for Caboose. It's just such a hard voice to replace because he's such an iconic iconic character, but props to him for having the balls to fill in those shoes the best he could. Now, probably the best moment, or at least the coolest moment in my opinion, was when Tex showed up. The twist that Caboose brought back Tex instead of Church to help them fight, because of course that's who you're gonna bring back when you want to fight, was the absolute best. And then when she turned black after going back through the teleporter, I was just like, that's so perfect. It was amazing. Like the coolest moment and most rewarding callback ever of all time. I also love that Tex and Carolina got to fight together, and I especially love that Tex finally got to win because this time she was based on their memories instead of the director's, because they remembered her always beating them up and never failing. As a therapist, and I'm a therapist by the way, it's kind of irrelevant for the most part, but to this comment, as a therapist, I'm like, that's awesome because that's narrative therapy right there. We change the stories we tell ourselves, and as a consequence, we can change our outcomes. And it's so brilliantly represented in Restoration by Tex. And just having her back at all this time was so great and so unexpected. Also, hearing Tex refer to herself as Allison Church for the first time was the ending I did not know I needed, but I did. Seeing them walk off together in the memory unit was the perfect tie-in to those scenes from the end of season 10 that never really had any closure, now that I think about it. It's kind of like this scene for me was like in No Way Home when Andrew Garfield grabbed MJ and saved her at the end. It was like, oh yeah, there was a piece of my heart that wasn't quite healed yet, you know? Like I said before, the freelancer stuff with Washington felt a little unearned, but gosh darn it, did it still put a smile on my face. Just seeing the Halo 3 characters show up at all hit me with that wave of nostalgia I was talking about before. And lastly, when the music builds in the end and Griff is saying goodbye to Caboose before the credits roll, I'm like embarrassed to say I got chills, but I did. I love that sappy crap. It's cheesy as hell, but exactly what a story like this needed to complete its 21-year run on a satisfactory note. So that's about it. Red vs. Blue can't bring back your childhood, and it can't cure disease. So if that's what you're looking for, try Gilmore Girls. I'm just kidding, that show's a mess. Do not try that. But for real, I was wrong about Red vs. Blue Restoration, because I wanted it to be some perfect masterpiece. But Red vs. Blue has always been a masterpiece because it's imperfect. And Restoration was a great send-off with a lot of heart. This show, along with Rooster Teeth, certainly made their mark on the internet forever, and they will be missed. Thanks for watching. Oh wait, don't forget to check out my love letter I was talking about to Red vs. Blue. It's on my channel. If you like Rooster Teeth, you like Red vs. Blue, I'm sure you'll like this video. Also, if you're a Halo fan, I'm actually in the middle of dissecting the entire Halo series game by game, so go ahead and check out those videos on my channel and stay tuned for more to come so soon. In the meantime, let me know what your favorite RVB moment is in the comments, and whether or not you liked Restoration. What do you think? Were you like me? Did you need a second watch? Or was it just love at first sight with the Blood Gulch guys again? Anyway, catch you next time.